Good morning, everybody. Morning. Hi, thank you for coming along to today's session. My name is Margie Jarvis. I'm the Learning and Development Director from Oxford University Press, and I'm lucky enough to have two great speakers with me this morning, Penelope Woolf and Rossella Proscia. Today is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be experimenting with a methodology, so you need to have come in here with an open mind. There isn't any role play. I heard some people talking about role play here. There isn't, I assure you. I'm Learning and Development Director at OUP. My background is in organisational development and change. I've been working in that field for about 20 years now. I think even the language around change and the terminology change doesn't help us because it's embedded in our way of thinking around change in terms of change being moving from a period of stability to instability and back to stability. And I think that way of thinking at the moment is not helpful for us. There's a methodology around change which was Lewin introduced in the 60s, which was about freeze, unfreeze and refreeze in terms of organisations. And I think the time has gone when we will ever refreeze. Because we need to be continually adapting. The objectives for today are to discuss the implications of the changing landscape of publishing and to clarify what that means for us in terms of the way that we work, the skills required of our people, and the challenges and opportunities that that presents. To discuss what skills we might require in the future, and to share ideas and learning with others in the industry. Today is not about us, it's about you. And so the methodology and the approach that we're going to be using is all around you. So this is not about experts standing at the front telling you all how to do it, because we even heard from Tim yesterday that there is no certainty and there is no right answer to a lot of this. But actually the collective intelligence in the room is what will help us get to a place where we can move on and start to think about some of these things. I'm going to start by giving a very brief introduction about the broader context of organisations and what we're dealing with, not for very long at all. And then Penelope Woolf, who has over 25 years experience in the world of publishing, is going to focus more on publishing skills, and then Rossella is going to pick up and focus more on marketing. So they will have a period when there will be some input. That's really to stimulate thinking, and then we will open up discussion at the table. Actually, I don't have a lot to say on this because I think Tim covered it at his keynote yesterday in terms of where we are, in terms of what we're dealing with in organisations, not just in the publishing sector, but organisations, and my experience in the last 20 years is that things are becoming increasingly complex. Our work is requiring us to get involved in more complex activities. We're required to collaborate more, to engage with people more. We're required to have more sophisticated social skills because of that relationship that we need with others. We need absolutely superb leadership in organisations to carry us through this turbulence. And our own expectations as employees and employers have changed. The way that we measure the value that we add in terms of the value add for our customers has changed. All of the external factors have changed. So there are constant imperatives that are creating an environment of challenge, shall I say. And it's for us to figure out how we deal with that. There are lots of paradoxes. So Tim talked about the fact that things are speeding up, that there are great demands on us. But that's coupled with us all realising that we need to have greater balance in life in terms of our work and our life. So we're constantly dealing with paradoxes. We're dealing with trying to work in organisations which are largely and historically made up of boundaries, whether that's divisions or departments or functions, and we have to become more boundaryless in order to be able to thrive in the current environment. There's a lot of talk around uncertainty and ambiguity, and yet we live in a world where we often crave certainty and we want to have a sense of the future. So we're holding all of those things, which creates for us an exciting and challenging environment, but it also creates in us feelings of anxiety as well, and we have to hold all of those things together. Even what we expect from work has changed quite significantly. So employees now enter the workplace wanting to make a contribution, wanting to feel that their work makes a difference, meaning at work. There's lots of research around meaning at work and the fact that many of us are looking to work for something else in terms of our sense of achievement and our identity. So that is only some of the things. There are a huge amount of things that are impacting upon us and changing the landscape of organisations, and I'm sure many of you will have other things that you would add to that. But largely what's creating quite a challenge for us is our understanding of organisations and how they work, and historically we've seen them to be a bit like machines, and that you can plan and things can be ordered and there's a predetermined path that we can follow in order to get to the future. And unfortunately, that is not a very helpful way for us to be thinking about organisations, but it is absolutely embedded into the way that we think about organisations, where now organisations are more about being self-organising, they're more about emergence, they're more about being organic, they're more about discovery. So today, we are going to use a methodology that's called World Cafe. And I'm going to encourage you to do something a little bit radical. I'm going to encourage you to put your notepads and your paper or your devices on the chair or floor next to you, because we're going to use the paper tablecloths that are on the table. So if I can encourage you to clear that space. Now, this methodology is based on lots of the principles of learning and change that I believe in, and that will help us move forward in organisations. It's based around the principles that there's no right answer. It's based around the principles that we need to engage with all of our employees and capitalise on the collective intelligence within our organisations, and that's what we're going to do here today with you. It's based upon us taking responsibility for what happens in organisations and for our own learning. So let me tell you a little bit about World Cafe. And also, the caveat is we are experimenting with this today. Usually this is a methodology that spans 1 or 2 days. We're going to do it in an hour and a half. So it's really just an opportunity to experiment. If anybody wants to know more about this methodology and other methodologies similar to this in terms of leading change in organisations, then please feel free to contact me. So it's based upon the principles of dialogue, and it's through conversation that will lead to action. It's based on the principles of us sharing our collective intelligence. It's based on the principles of you taking responsibility for what you want to get out of this session. So that means you as an individual, if the conversation at your table isn't going in the direction that you would like to, or adding value for you, or you see it isn't for the group, it's for you to step in and to say that. If you have a particular burning question and you want to get some input from people around the table, it's your responsibility to do that. So it's based upon you taking responsibility, but it's based upon questions. So yes, it's based upon dialogue, but that means we need to engage in dialogue and listen, but it's based upon questions. So think about the questions that you ask others. So when somebody's talking about their experience, ask questions to try and understand that further, because that in essence will help everybody around the table as well. So the idea is you take responsibility for what you feel needs to be captured. If there's something that you feel you say or somebody else says that is important to share with this whole community here and the wider ALPS community, because we will photograph the tablecloths afterwards, you need to take responsibility for capturing that. And rather than capturing that on your own piece of paper, we're taking a collective responsibility for what to capture on the tablecloth. So there are pens there. So when you feel compelled, do write or draw. We often get a lot of interesting pictures as well, however you want to express yourself. But it's for you to capture on the tablecloth. Okay, so what we need to make this event successful is for you to be open-minded, to embrace the ambiguity that you might find at your table, to be open and honest, to share your experiences with others, to find the valuable learning that you can take from each conversation, to be committed to share the output of your conversations with others post-event, and to trust in each other and the process. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with Penelope, who's going to talk to us for a short while. Then she's going to open up discussions at the table. You will have an opportunity to sit, to discuss, to write when you feel compelled to capture anything, to ask questions. We will photograph the tablecloths at the end of the session. At the end of Penelope's session, I will then request that you move tables and you sit with somebody that you haven't sat with this morning, that you maybe haven't sat with during other events, so people who you don't know. And then we will go into Rossella's session and we will do the same again. Any questions on the methodology? No? Okay, excellent. At which point I will hand over to Penelope.
Right, good morning everybody, and thanks for finding your way over here. That was quite a good achievement. So a lot of the themes that I'm going to talk about have already been echoed by speakers yesterday and by the communication speaker this morning, which I think is great, shows that we're probably all thinking about the same things, change in how we communicate to our customers. I'm looking at this changing skills landscape from a perspective really about how do we attract the right people into publishing. We're all talking about change and needing different skills, but I think we've got something we need to overcome, which you'll see because I'm going to play you a video in a minute of some students and what they think publishing is about. So I would say on our messaging, we need to get the message out there, not only about the value of publishing, but actually people really don't know what we do and they have different ideas about what we do. Also, I think we want to come to this session, I want you to have the perspective both about being a hiring manager, thinking about the skills that you need to recruit in, but also about the people in your companies and how you upskill those people in a period of great change. So before I play you our student videos, I just thought it was really interesting to find out some perceptions. It's not terribly scientific. It's 6 interviews with 12 students. It's slightly biased because they were interviewed in the OUP bookshop, so obviously they had OUP books all around them. So when they're asked to think about publishers, obviously they're going to think about OUP. They are from Oxford's unique summer school. This is Oxford University trying to attract in students who wouldn't necessarily think about going to Oxford University. So they come from what they call the deprived postcodes. So it's a kind of part of Oxford's outreach programme. So those are the students we interviewed. The students, they're all about 17. They've completed 1 year of A-level study or equivalent. And we'd like to play you some of their comments when we asked them about what they thought of publishing. I want to apologise a little bit for the background noise in this, and I hope you'll be able to hear it.
Printing of text.
Yeah.
The mass printing of books, or like any sort of written down text.
It's related to books.
I would say probably like the sort of manufacturing process, like sort of the printing presses. I mean, I don't know if it's out of date or not, but I'd say that's the sort of image that comes to mind.
I probably think like machines, like book binding machines.
Lots of printing of books.
Yeah, or newspapers and articles.
Sort of manuscripts, reading through manuscripts and sort of changing them so that they're suitable for the general public.
Process of making a text into a book and selling it, I guess.
Yeah, saying the process by which a book's just an author's and then it becomes in the public sphere.
People who read through the sort of manuscripts, proof checking, spelling, grammar, people in charge of layout, so pictures, where they go,
editing,
Yeah, proofreading things.
marketing.
And then the actual physical making. I don't know if that's done by people anymore. but
Design it,
yeah,
target
yeah,
audiences.
covers and stuff like that.
I probably think the people who like proofread the manuscripts, people who like create the books, like bookbinding.
Writers who write the things.
People that find people that have books to
Yeah,
publish.
yeah, like agents and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, and distributors.
I think editing is probably a big part of it.
Designing the format of the book, the cover, and you know how you're going to set it up inside, how big it's going to be.
I'd say possibly having an influence of the content of the book as well. So if someone's come to a publisher with an idea and it's not quite formed in the way that a publisher would think would be good for the general public, for example, then it can have like a more substantial effect on the content of the book rather than just proofreading.
Considered it before. I thought about, obviously because history involves a lot of reading, and that was something I really enjoyed, so maybe looking into publishing for the reading of the manuscripts, that area, rather than the editorials. I haven't really thought about it much, but then again I haven't thought about any careers.
Yeah, I think so. I really like English, so I think it would be something that would interest me, but I don't really know much. Like I've not been like exposed to much about it, so
I wouldn't really know how to start going about getting into the industry. I wouldn't know where to begin or where to apply.
I'd quite like to be a proofreader. I think that would be quite a good job because you just read so much and that would be your only job.
Yeah, I've probably thought about it, but then I wouldn't really know what specific role I could go into, just sort of like the collective industry, but then don't really know enough about the roles in industry to go into. So.
Oxford University Press is Random House. They just had a merger, maybe. Penguin.
Bloomsbury, the one that did Harry Potter.
Penguin.
Penguin,
Black Swan.
Ladybird, like Oxford Press and University Presses.
I'm trying to think of Hodder.
Wordsworth Classics.
Oxford University Press, Bloomsbury, Penguin, Ladybird, Routledge or something.
Faber, is Faber and Faber or just Faber? Random House, Scholastic, Dawn Kinsley. I think Lonely Planet publishers as well.
Yeah.
And Cambridge University Press.
Yeah.
Penguins.
Welsh ones. Go on.
There's Gormel. That's quite a big one in Wales. It's through the medium of Welsh anyway. I study a lot of those in schools. Yeah.
Penguin.
Faber and Faber.
Right, so no real surprises there, I think. I think you can see that these are very bright people. They just don't have access to knowing what publishing's about. And we didn't hear anything on the full. That's obviously edited down, but on the full interviews, nobody mentioned, apart from the university presses, nobody had any idea about journals or the wider world of publishing, and they were very, very focused on trade. That's probably what you'd expect, but a lot of what they said is probably about 100 years out of date, so I think we do have a bit of an image problem. So a few images. This is what they thought about. There was a lot about proofreading, grammar, about machines, bookbinding machines, manufacturing books. And, you know, the roles, as you heard, it was all about editorial and people who design, cover designers. As I say, we're a bit influenced by being in OUP, so I think OUP and CUP came out of this quite well, but otherwise it was predominantly what you would expect, I think, which is the big brand trade publishers. Also rather interesting, I did a little bit of an unscientific, what I call a mind the gap analysis. So on the left, I put down all the roles that the students mentioned and how many times they mentioned them. And they think that, you know, publishers are full of proofreaders and manuscript checkers, etc. And then I put on the right, I just went to one very big publisher's website, and there are some of you from that publisher here today who publishes across the whole range, trade, STM, the whole lot, journals, and I just counted up the number of jobs that they had on their website and categorised them, and you can see the total mismatch between what this rather unscientific small group of students, but I would argue they're fairly typical, and what actually the roles that were being advertised are. So what I'm really saying is we've got a big mismatch between what people think the industry is about. And when I went to a university recently, I went to their science department and I said, have you thought about publishing? And they looked at me like I was absolutely mad. They had no idea that scientists might actually think about going into publishing. So I'm really saying I think we do have a bit of a messaging issue here. So putting that to the back of our mind, let's just move on now and think about the changing publishing landscape. And if there are 3 words I think we all would know are changing, one is we need to focus on the customer, focus on digital, and we need to be global. I don't need to tell you about these things. You know that our workflows are changing. They're no longer linear like in the print world. We will have a multiplicity of new business models to get our head around. It's all about the customer. It's all about data and how we capture and analyse that. We need to hire people that are a bit more nuanced in local cultures, but they can think like global citizens. We have new competitors coming at us, and we heard yesterday that, you know, don't underestimate the power of the new entrants. Increasing complexity, and therefore I would argue that our resources need to be really flexible. Maybe we don't just need to think about there's a gap, we fill it. We need to really think about how we can flex that resource. And again, we've heard about the blurring of functional roles. I also think it's worth pausing and actually thinking about what hasn't changed. What will we continue to need in publishing? Let's not throw out all the skills we've got and think that we need to be totally different. And I've just grouped some of the things that I think will always be of enduring, lasting importance in publishing. We need people who can form really good relationships externally and internally, who are creative but can see the commercial value of their creativity. People who have a real clarity of vision, and again we heard about that a little bit this morning. How do you capture the essence of what you're doing in just a few words? How can you be really, really clear in how you articulate that message? It's all about the customer, we know that. I think increasingly we're going to have people who need to be adept project managers and have excellent time management and organisation skills, because as we know, it's all about bringing teams together to solve a problem and then move on to the next thing. I think we need people with very strong analytical problem-solving skills, and, you know, we're all about quality, we're all about content. We need people who can recognise that and nurture their authors or creators or editors. So what is changing? Well, for the employee, obviously it's, you know, bringing in people who are digital natives, who understand social media from an intuitive basis rather than the likes of my generation trying to get their head around it. People who intuitively understand the opportunities created by technology and they can embrace that change. I think thinking from an employer, as I said, I think we're going to be thinking more about hiring for projects and not necessarily for permanent roles, bringing in flexible resource, possibly more freelance consultancy, outsourcing and offshoring. So actually I think we have to think very carefully about our hiring and how we do it. So just a little more on each of those. So the digital literacy, that's obviously understanding how technology can be used, implemented. It's about new workflows and re-engineering our current workflows. And the debate that was talked about yesterday, do you try and bolt it onto what you're doing now, or do you separate it out into a different bit of the business? We'll hear a lot more about this, but the ability to plot, measure and analyse user journeys is going to become increasingly important. Understanding supplier contracts for technology services. This is all taking up a lot more of people's time. Legal departments are getting bigger. We need to understand how we integrate products and services better, and obviously commission for content that can be exploited any which way, digital first, print first, together. Okay, so focusing on the customer, we've heard quite a bit about this. It's all about answering their needs, not just pumping products into a market. It's moving from selling to consulting, selling and key account management, and a greater emphasis on market research and data analytics. And we need to be able to evidence the outcomes. Obviously, the Holy Grail is always to be able to say, if you use this product, it will get you X or Y result. It will solve your problem. It will improve educational outcomes. In terms of the global citizen, you've got to be able to think about not only commissioning content from the right place, but also versioning that content for different markets. The ability to market, sell and supply globally, and also to understand the legal context in which you're operating around the world. And I think, again, talking about flexible resource, the ability to bring together high-performing teams, possibly global teams, to solve a particular issue. So in summary, I think we need to hang on to the things that make publishing fun, creative, and attract the right people into it. And I would argue that those core skills don't really change, but we also need to hire in and upskill for the 3 key areas that I've mentioned to you: the digital, the focus on the customer, and the ability to think globally. I would also argue that many of our company cultures will need to change and adapt to make that possible. And again, we've heard quite a lot about that at this conference. We need to have a new attitude to our resource and our staff. And again, we've heard a bit about that. We've heard something I like, which is treat your employees as volunteers. I thought that was a good message. We need to be flexible. As you've seen, I think a lot of this is happening, but we really need to work on changing the perception of the industry. Otherwise, we're not going to attract the right talent in. So thank you very much for that. And I'm just going to hand over to Margie now to explain what we're going to do on our tables.
Yeah. Good morning, almost noon, everybody. So similar setup as we've seen for Penelope, but I'm going to I've had a little bit of a think about marketing skills and what's needed in this changing environment. So I'm going to be, in the next few slides, asking a few questions. You can jot them down on your tables if you like. Effectively, they can form the basis of your discussion in the next 10-15 minutes. But I also wanted to start from a little icebreaker, and also to help me understand the room a little bit better. How many of the people in the room are in marketing or associated to marketing functions? Okay. And how many are in publishing? Okay, so there's kind of slightly a skew towards publishing. I'm going to ask a few questions. You don't need to answer, but you can raise your hand if you like. I think there's an ever-present tension, we could call it, between marketing and publishing about who does what, who does certain things. And I'm just kind of calling out some of the things that I think oftentimes I found myself in, perhaps in the middle. One of those is who defines the product proposition. Would you say it's publishing or marketing? Who develops a targeted message to the customer audiences? Who sets price? We do products, they might be print, they might be digital, but who sets the price for them? Or is it a collaborative effort? Who researches market potential for new ideas or even for particular segments? Who defines the user experience? Who implements marketing campaigns, integrated or not? Conducts competitive analysis, commissions content, manages the PR, the sales channels, and ultimately is responsible for product P&L. And you might have given different answers to all of this. I probably can say that, in my opinion, the two are blurring, really. The two are merging, and so oftentimes they're different in the structure of the organization, but they do require a lot of collaboration between the marketing and the publishing teams. So the first question I ask myself, and you can be asking yourselves, is what skills do you recruit for in a marketing role, and how has that changed in the last 5 years? So I kind of tried to think of it as a whistle-stop tour in the world of marketing. And because I'm in higher education marketing, I thought about textbook, which is effectively what people associate with in kind of educational publishing. So how has the marketing of textbooks evolved through the years? And with the benefit of digital, actually, I've been able to look into, for example, the archives of the Time. The Time Digital Archive is one of the things that my company does. And this is an advert from 1928 from a publisher that I don't believe exists anymore, Universal Textbooks. And what I thought was really interesting there was, first of all, the fact that it was an advert in a fairly broad kind of ranging publication, The Times, but an advert for a textbook. And then some of the things that were called out in there were actually things that we still highlight when we market textbooks, like, for example, that there are color illustrations or that the book is well written. But the really nice one was that there was a comprehensive index that stands out to point the way. So it's kind of quaint. Then we move on to 1955, McGraw-Hill, an advert for an economics textbook. And I think actually this is quite interesting because, again, the publication selected for advertising this was The Economist, so we couldn't afford to advertise our textbook on The Economist nowadays, so we don't do that. But it's interesting that, you know, the kind of the specific of the advert points out how this economic textbook has evolved with the times and how this third edition covers things like chapters on the economics of war and defense, which are obviously so topical. And we did a similar thing in 2009 where we were putting out our economics textbook, and we were pointing out how this textbook was so relevant because it was encapsulating the learning from the global economic crisis, which kind of endures. OUP, 1991, this one, and it's an advert on, it was an advert on the Times Literary Supplement. So I think this kind of already verges a lot more towards what we're doing today. So we're cluster marketing textbooks. There are so many textbooks around nowadays, you can't afford to just promote one. And perhaps the most interesting thing is that although it was 1991, for more information, please contact, and there's the name of somebody and no website. So, you know, we're not talking of a long time ago, or at least not in my books, but, you know, the web didn't exist at the time. And this is an example of something that we have actually, we're doing nowadays. It's one of the campaigns that must have gone out about a month or two ago from my marketing team. The things I would call out here are that A, it's an email campaign, so the mode of marketing has changed. B, is going to lecturers, so it obviously tries to target a much more specific audience. And three, it actually has a kind of call to action which is a lot more visible, and the call to action is to access an e-sample copy. So the whole thing has moved over to a digital world, although we're effectively still marketing what is a print textbook. And then the other one, a campaign that also has come out of my marketing team quite recently, which kind of tries to encourage lecturers to shift to digital ebook versions and talks about the benefits of that. And then finally, a little kind of advert that will be going out in certain universities as a poster this year in this Back to University season, which effectively is, you know, talks to students about the benefit of going for an ebook versus a textbook and the savings that they will make. So I guess the idea here is to how not just the message has changed, but also the delivery mode and the audience has changed. And obviously that's quite logical given that we've taken such a long time span in taking a look at this. So I guess some of the reasons for change, and I'm focusing particularly on higher education, but I'm sure a lot of this resonates also in for those of you who are in journal publishing or that are dealing with societies or are dealing with libraries. Education markets are in transition in the sense that, particularly in education, there was a study by UNESCO in 2011 that pointed out that by 2025 there would be about 263 million students enrolled in higher education, and that is 1 billion students more than we have today, obviously globally across the world. And whereas obviously the student numbers are growing so fast, resources, finances at the state level to fund those university places are not there. And therefore, nationwide, institution-wide, and even at the level of certain departments, people are looking at ICT, at technology, as a way of distributing education and educational content in a more cost-effective way. So the digital transition is not just happening because the technologies have caught up with things. It's happening because there is a genuine need at the institutional and even national education system level. These, though, obviously, we're mostly, I guess, working in the UK, and most of us also for the UK market. We all know about the increase of tuition fees that our students, our children probably will have to cope with. They've trebled in the last 3 years. So, and that has brought about, from the student perspective, kind of a feeling that they're a consumer. They have much more of a bigger voice in how they are taught, in the way that they are taught, and in the resources that they're used to teach them. So students and institutions are becoming increasingly two customer groups that, from a marketing perspective, but also from an organizational perspective, we're focusing on trying to develop products that meet the needs of these particular two new constituents we didn't used to really care about much in the past. Then obviously from a marketing perspective, communication has changed. I don't need to tell you the web, kind of the rise of Web 2.0. One thing I will point out though, and it actually came, it was mentioned also this morning in the presentation by Wiley on communication, is that although a lot of us are looking at Web 2.0 tools of communicating, we're kind of active on Twitter, we're acting on Facebook, we're acting on the world of digital advertising. There was a survey done this year by ALPSP to CMOs, to chief marketing officers, and other kind of particularly advertising specialists in the industry, and the general feeling for the majority of them was that only 12% of them believed that there was really a direct link between the use of Web 2.0 technologies and the growth in sales numbers. So we're doing it, but we're also doing to perhaps put out a softer message, more than necessarily to drive hard sales and revenues. But in the midst of all this, obviously I'm in marketing. I feel marketing has a very, very big role to play in the transition. So again, my experience in 2012, 2011, I looked at the Cengage marketing organization, and I felt that we needed to split and to kind of really develop some function and some skills, I guess I felt that the skills that were needed to do marketing communications and the skills that were needed to do strategic marketing were very different. So I split the two teams and tried to focus certain parts of the team on product messaging, product positioning, helping with product development, competitor tracking, all these kind of things. And then another part of the team, the marketing communications team, to really focus on expertise on, on how to communicate. So for example, design, copywriting, all that. So the two teams have been split. We've been kind of in that mode for about a year. And, we've had some teething problems, but I think we're beginning to see actually how this is working and how kind of the success of this transition. So the two roles, the two groups, strategic marketing and marketing communication, and what they do are outlined there. So the question, again, that I ask myself and that you could be asking yourselves about your organization is, what skills do you recruit for a marketing role? And again, my very much my own experience has been to be thinking about what does a strategic marketing need to do, and what do they need, and how do they need to be, and what does a marketing communication manager need to do, and so what is their profile? What kind of skills and aptitudes do they need to have? And so you can see there on the strategic marketing side, a lot of what they actually effectively do is portfolio management, brand management. So they need the ability to analyze also financial data, but market data, to be able to establish the position of a product or a brand or a portfolio in the market. But also, it's very important to me, they need to have synthesis skills. So they need to not just being able to say, oh, 35% of people do this and 35% of people do that, or want this or want that. They actually need to be able to translate that insight into concrete insight into product development or insight into marketing something to that particular constituent. So analysis is just the foundation. Synthesis is actually the call to action. They need to be dealing with the various sales channels that we have. Some of them are distributors, some of them are directly our sales force, some of them could be, just kind of the open web through website, e-commerce, etc. So communication, presentation skills are very important. They need to have the techniques of market research, but also I think a lot of soft skills, and I think Penelope, you mentioned that earlier, are soft skills of, being able to predict and anticipate the market, being able to kind of lead on change. So, you have a good idea, you have to actually be able to convince people around you in the organization. Everybody's very busy, everybody's focusing on their own job. So I need people who can actually change the way that things are within the organization out of really their own internal drive. And you need diplomacy because, as I said, it's not just between marketing and publishing, it's between marketing and sales, it's between the UK operation with the US operation, it's with the customers, it's all that. Marketing communications, on the other hand, as I said, there are some very specific skills like copywriting and designing that perhaps people will have gathered through their own interest or at university or whatnot. But also things like project management are very important. There are a lot of demands on this team, and the ability to, to say they will do something, do it in time, do it at cost, and do it times 100 every month is very important. And so for that, you need people with very strong project management skills, or at least the head of that team needs to be. Another question, how might these skills change in 5 years? Well, I guess this is probably just a kind of an intro slide. I'm sure you all can think of a lot of other ways. I would like to hear what your thoughts are on how the skills might change. My kind of thinking was particularly around technology. So our product lines already are primarily digital, or as in the case of educational publishers, are moving to become digital. And so we have the opportunity, and we are effectively gathering a lot of insight on how our customers are using our digital product. At the same time, as marketeers, we're also gathering insight on how our customers are interacting with our online digital communications. Obviously, we know the open rates, the click rates, the bounce rates, all these kind of things. So we need to be able to, A, gather that input, and B, again, being able to translate that into new messaging, new positioning, new product development, etc. So really this kind of data interpretation and data analysis will become an increasingly important skill in, I think, marketing. And then curiosity and versatility, we were talking about this earlier at the table. Not just, to try and work with new technologies. New technologies will continue to happen. So if I were to hire today somebody who was very proficient and competent in blogging and twittering, that skill will become obsolete in maybe 2 years' time. Who knows? So what I really need is somebody who's curious, who just, naturally finds out where are people on the web or, even offline. Where are they? How can I communicate with them? I think that's more of an important skill, or rather is a skill that has more longevity than, the mechanics of blogging or twittering. And then, again, Penelope, you brought the case for kind of globalization. We need people with real appreciation of cultural diversity, which sometimes is language skills, but sometimes is just respectfulness, I guess, if I can call it that. We, as my company, but a lot of other companies are increasingly doing a lot of business in the Middle East. Things are different there. And, we should not approach communicating to the Middle East from a UK or European perspective, and these are things are done. And, I think a few people have fallen foul of this, and and so it's important that the people that belong into my marketing organization, or I guess anybody's organization, do have that kind of appreciation that the customer and their needs come first, and therefore, you know, wherever the customer is located, those needs need to be understood and appreciated. So again, what kind of person do I want to attract in a marketing role? Again, I had a good and long think about it, and you know, what I came up with was not even my actually coming up with it, but I thought the quote from the New York Times really encapsulated what I'm looking for. I'm looking personally for people who find meaning in what they do. You know, they really get excited, that their eyes sparkle when they're talking about a new product or a new idea. That they're accountable and inventive, and lastly, that who will take action on the things that they want, you know, that they feel are important for the company. So you will see there's actually not much of kind of technology or technical expertise in there. There is not much of even, you know, CIM marketing diplomas. There's not, you know, I really looked at the kind of people that I've hired and who has been successful, in my opinion, and they kind of all had these characteristics. So that's kind of my 2 cents about it, if you like. So the last question, is marketing still a distinct function? Well, obviously I'm in marketing, so to me everything is marketing. Publishing doesn't exist anymore. As long as there is kind of a need to satisfy customer requirement in a profitable way, and obviously identifying them and anticipating them, I think there will be a need for marketing in any organization. But then again, you know, don't take it from me. We said there are no experts here, so I think I'll kind of now leave it to the tables to have this discussion and call me out wrong if I am. Thank you.